When Isaac Clarke reaches the transport hub, the power is cut by Director Tideman. Ellie tells Isaac that there are backup solar arrays that have gone long unused that could restore power if Isaac can activate them and would allow them to escape the government sector. In order to get to the solar array, Isaac has to take the longest elevator ride in history while fighting this thing. I died a lot in this part. From what I understand, this extremely agreeable young man is called the Tormentor, and if you die to him, you get a reference to the cover of the original Dead Space. However, despite how many times I died to this fella, I don't think I ever actually captured that Easter egg. Upon reaching the solar array, you find these lockers, and I didn't see this thing next to the locker, so I suffered an unfortunate but immediate dismemberment. Going through this door, we're greeted by a few birds flying past Isaac in a flurry of drifting feathers and the ghostly holographic visage of an AI assistant that welcomes us to Solar Array Sigma-05 and tells us that proper identification is required. It also says that Watchman Howard Phillips will be with us shortly. Taking a look around and waiting for the definitely alive, certainly not very deceased Watchman to come out and check our identification, we can see a number of bird cages and a wall screen much like we see in the hospital in the beginning and in the baby room in the apartments, except this one is displaying a serene field and a blue sky. Birds fly in the distance. It looks like footage from a GoPro somewhere in Kansas. Although considering by this time Earth has been almost entirely out of resources for a long time, I don't imagine any part of Earth looks like this anymore. I didn't notice when I first entered the room, only after I waited a moment for this AI to talk again, that there is actually a bird in this cage. I thought perhaps it was a stuffed or taxidermied one, but then its head moved. This bird, along with the others in here, to my knowledge, are the only animals seen in either Dead Space 1 or 2. I may be wrong, but I don't remember ever seeing any kind of animals anywhere else. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, there's early concept art of a necromorph cat, but even that is still a necromorph. This is just bird. While I was working on this video, I came across this picture. It's an advertisement for a line of children's toys based on extinct animal species, and the main 5 are bees, bears, dolphins, hippopotamuses, and chimpanzees. The bottom corner features a little text box advertising the other extinct animal friends, such as eagle, giraffe, elephant, wolf, and penguin. This advertisement confirms that, at least by the year 2511, all of these animals that we're very familiar with have all gone extinct. I just thought this was really interesting and a really good piece of world building. The Dead Space games really do accomplish so much with the smallest elements, and details like this develop the world much more organically and in a more engaging way than simply telling us that these animals are extinct. Anyways, it was at this point that I realized there's another bird in a cage directly to the right of this big display screen. It moves its feathers, hopefully very blissfully unaware of its situation. When I looked at this screen for a moment longer, I began to wonder what it would feel like to be a person looking upon this, homesick for a world they never got to see. A look out the window quickly reminds us how foreign this kind of natural vista is in the world of Dead Space. There's a store up here, and next to it is this weird soda machine thing that I think looks pretty cool. There are also posters on the wall showing the World Pigeon Contest winners and other wild birds. Also, there's a flamingo on this one. Going back into this area and going into this room, we see Howard Phillips laying dead on his bed below several more bird posters. Next to him, we find a text log. Personal log, Howard Phillips. Record number 304. I want to go home. Auntie claims she didn't get a response to my transfer request, but it's the 5th one. How could there be 5 requests and no response? Surely someone's getting them. Someone's reading them? I hate to admit it, but the loneliness up here is really more intense than I expected. I think it's really starting to affect me. The only good news is that Auntie claims to have authorized my shipment request. They're supposed to be arriving later today, but I can't believe anything she tells me. I've been asking for so long. It's hard to believe they might actually let me have my birds. Time will tell. Tonight will tell, actually. This text log on its own gives us much more context for the rest of the living area of the solar array. The posters and the wall screen were there long before the actual birds. Howard Phillips, the watchman, had been up here for an unknown amount of time and had been trying everything to make himself more comfortable in the intense isolation of the solar array. The sprawl is isolated enough as is, but up here, there's no one. Just the AI assistant, apparently named Auntie. He put in request after request to be transferred away with no response. It's implied by this first text log that Auntie isn't even passing along the requests and is instead just lying and saying that there has been no response. Howard was, however, finally able to have his birds, which would hopefully give him some more comfort and make him feel at home in such a sterile and lonely place, high above the sprawl. Immediately after reading this text log and realizing that this corpse was Howard Phillips, I used kinesis and hauled his body out into the main area and used it to pass through this door, since the door is locked by some sort of rig scan system. Auntie says this when the door unlocks.
Rig authorization recognized. Greetings, Station Watchman Howard Phillips. I hope you slept well.
That last sentence is very sad. Hopefully, this story doesn't get much sadder with any subsequent text logs. Continuing into this corridor, we see another instance of Auntie in this hologram device. Despite having been able to open the door to this room, the security in this room identifies Isaac as an unauthorized visitor and asks for Howard Phillips to provide a verbal access code to authorize his guest. It even popped up with some defensive lasers, which I was only able to see because I laid down on the ground and smoked a cigarette, using the smoke trails to spot the laser beams.
Just joking, kid. Those things will stunt your growth and ruin your health.
It was in my attempts to find a way to replicate this man's voice that I saw that the wall screen has a little habitat control panel on the side, offering settings, climate, and motif. The more I've played this game and the more I've paid attention, the more I appreciate all of the effort that went into the world building. The world of Dead Space feels believable, in a way that intensifies the horror. We're given enough of a look into the way people live on the sprawl that we as players are able to imagine ourselves in these places. I can imagine living in an apartment like this, shopping in these stores, going to the transport hub to commute to work, going in for med checks and regular appointments in this hospital. This world is lived in, basically, is what I'm saying. At this point, out of curiosity and not knowing what to do, I just yeeted Howard Phillips' corpse into the lasers, and it worked to disable them, although it did a considerable amount of damage. I walked around and made sure that every set of lasers was taken care of. After clearing the necromorphs from this room and narrowly avoiding being sucked into the reaches of space, although that doesn't actually happen, Isaac gets cut in half by the door, I noticed that there is yet another instance of Auntie. So far, there are no places in this area that are out of sight for Auntie. In this locker, we find another text log. This one is number 466. The previous one was 304. I'm not sure how often the Watchman writes logs, so it's tough to know if a lot of time passed between these logs, but there have been many logs in between. Personal log, Howard Phillips. Record number 466. I've been trying to stay out of range of Auntie's interfaces as much as I can. I don't want to hear her excuses anymore about my transfer requests. Every time I ask, I just get computerized bullshit. 23 requests. I put in 23 requests and not one response. I know she's lying. I know she never sent them. I showed Auntie, though. I let all my birds out of their cages at lunch. It was beautiful. They were all flying around free and happy. I wish I could be them. Auntie was spouting regulations and talking about abnormal profiles. I didn't care. I danced with the birds all day. I love my birds. I want to go home. At this point, it seems pretty clear that Auntie is purposefully not passing along Howard's transfer requests, although the reason why is unclear. It is also unclear why Auntie would pass through the requests to ship in the birds, but not the other requests. Maybe Auntie is hyper-sentient and would just get really lonely. Or maybe it has a particular attachment to Howard himself. But we read here that in defiance of the constantly overseeing and controlling AI system, Howard let all of his birds out and spent the day with them, as the AI kept reciting regulations that prohibit everything he's doing. In a bleak and tragic situation in a generally pretty bleak and tragic game, the image of Howard dancing with his birds amidst the protests of the regulation-obsessed AI is a beautiful thought. By ripping off this panel and absolutely butchering all of the internal components with all the epic engineering skills that Isaac has gathered throughout the years, we gain unauthorized access to the access lift, and can go to the upper level. As soon as I stepped off the lift, I saw an upgrade bench and went up to it. When I opened the bench, I saw a leaper crawl across the outside of the glass quickly, accompanied by a musical cue. This reminds me of another thing that the first Dead Space games do extremely well. There are really no points at which you feel safe. Even if the necromorphs are not visible, they're there. They're in the vents, and in the vacuum of space, and they're watching. Exploring the upper area, where there's a very kindly placed save station, I went through this door, which for some reason caused Auntie to purge the life support. Boy, that sure does make me glad I just happened to be wearing an airtight helmet when that happened. I hacked this panel and safely bring back the life support. However, immediately after doing so, Director Tideman can be heard giving the order for all of the solar array functions to be shut down.
Computer, this is Director Tideman. Disable all solar array functions immediately.
Initiating system lockdown.
Leaving us with no choice but to Big Boss through the fence to access the... I messed with these fuses for a while, and then went absolutely beast mode on the exposed bits of the mainframe, finally shutting down Auntie and reverting the solar array back to exclusively manual operation. For a lot of people, this may have been the end of the very short story of Howard Phillips. However, if you have an extra power node that you're willing to spare for this log, you can find a third and final text log from the Titan Station Solar Array's final watchman. It reads as follows. Personal log, Howard Phillips. Record number 497. They hate me. They all hate me. I can see them all. They're everywhere now, just perched, watching me. Even Auntie. She's just waiting until old Howard Phillips finally goes crazy and snaps like he did when he let the birds out, violated all the codes, broke the rules. I'll show them, crazy. I'll show them what it takes to get out of here. They'll have to come up here and clean up all this blood, and then what rules will they make? I'll break those too. I'm gonna go lay down. I don't feel right. It's hard to say whether Howard's mental decline is due to the presence of a red marker on Titan Station or simply the crippling loneliness of his job, but however he got there, Mr. Phillips has become very unstable. His birds, one of, if not the only thing that brought him a sense of comfort and joy and release from the suffocating emptiness of space, now fill him with paranoia. He has become convinced that they hate him, and that they, along with Auntie, are actively waiting for and preying on his downfall. I think it's safe to say that it's relatively heavily implied in this final log that Howard Phillips' death was self-inflicted. In a final act of defiance and desperation, Howard Phillips took his own life, leaving the world with a message full of spite towards the world that imprisoned him in this void vacuum. They'll have to come up here and clean up all this blood, and then what rules will they make? All of these messages give the idea that Howard Phillips died before the necromorph outbreak actually began. It may well have been influenced by the presence of the marker, but the death of Watchman Phillips is one of mostly abject sorrow. Obviously, I don't condone his actions, but in this scenario, he can probably be considered lucky for not having to endure the necromorph onslaught that directly followed his death. After this, there's no more mention of Watchman Howard Phillips. By the end of the game, the player and Isaac alike have both probably forgotten his name. Overall, I think this is a really cool story told in a really cool way, and when I revisited this game, I knew I wanted to tell you all about it. So hopefully you found this entertaining and moderately informative, and if you liked it, please leave a like or subscribe or something, and I will see you in another video. Bye, y'all.